Um, so I'm having very bad internet connection. I'm not going to switch on my video. I'd like to be able to at least share my screen. I've prepared a presentation for you guys.
Oh,
As mentioned, I am very passionate about youth development. I was working at the University of Pretoria for many, many years. And one of the key things that I used to do there is to assist students to prepare their CVs, their cover letters, as well as prepare for interviews, as well as self-presentation in case they needed to do a presentation at an interview. Let me see if I can share my screen. Let me know if you can see it.
Yes, now it's visible on my side.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to skip the name because everyone knows who I am by now. But today I'm actually going to cover the writing of your CV, as well as the writing of a cover letter, and then some interview preparation. And then I'll talk a little bit as well about preparing your elevator pitch. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to that section. And specifically with writing of your curriculum vitae or CV, or in some instances, it's called a resume. I'll touch specifically what it is, a CV, the things that one needs to consider before writing your CV, the structure of your CV, as well as a little bit of a workshop activity for you guys to just have a thought around, you know, what are the different things that one would need to consider when writing your CV. And then I'll touch on the cover letter. So what it is exactly, the considerations that you should make when drafting it, the structure of the cover letter, as well as the different contents that you should cover in your cover letter. And then, like I said, I'll mention, you know, interview preparation, what are the different things one should do to prepare for an interview. And then I'll also just talk you through an elevator pitch, which is something I think is very important for every individual to have. But I'll touch on that a little bit later when I do get to that section. If you have any questions, I can't see the comment box. I think the chairpersons, the co-chairpersons can maybe just flag them to me and then I'll answer them as we go along. Otherwise, you can keep them till the end and I'll answer any questions that anybody has. Okay. So what is a CV? Primarily, a CV is just a summary of your career history. It's also a brief account of your education, your work history, your skills, etc. Also remember that if you don't necessarily have experience, you can still make your CV such that you do seem quite attractive to the recruiter. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then obviously the main function is to impress the employer so that they can bring you in, you know, for a job interview. Ultimately, you want them to look at your CV and think, oh my gosh, this is the person that we want to interview. Unfortunately, most recruiters actually look through a CV in 30 seconds. So if you haven't structured it properly, if you have spelling and grammar errors, and if you haven't written it in a manner that it's actually quite appealing to the eye, you might find yourself, you know, having your CV thrown to the side where you maybe meet the requirements, but because of the way that you've written it, the way that you've structured it, it doesn't appeal. Therefore, they don't look at it. You guys all know that we've got very high unemployment rates in South Africa. So when a recruiter, you know, has a position, especially if it's a junior or a lower level position, there are thousands of applications. And even if they use screening questions, it's very likely that when they do look at your CV, if it doesn't appeal to them, if it doesn't feel like it's something that, you know, they can quickly squeeze through in a few seconds, it is very likely that your CV will be thrown in the rejection pile, even if you may have had the necessary qualities and qualifications. Okay, so the things that you want to consider when you're writing your CV is every CV is going to be different. You're not going to use the same CV that you're applying for a teleconsultant role, that you're going to use for a business consultant role, that you're going to use for a teacher position role, that you're going to use for a principal position role, if you know that's kind of your career aspiration. Every CV is going to be different. You have to be willing to adjust your CV every single time that you prepare it. And that's specifically because you want to capture your target audience. You want to make sure that you are writing your CV based on the job specification or the criteria that they've asked for. So if they tell you that you have to write your CV in 2 pages, you have to find a way to write it in 2 pages. You can't make it a 4 pages. I mean, I've seen CVs when I was at Volkswagen and Grintech and even at the military. I'd see CVs that were 20 pages long and the person that barely had any experience. So I couldn't understand why you'd have so much pages in your CV. If you've worked, for example, for 15, 20, 30 years, it's different, but you still wouldn't write a very lengthy CV because you want it to be impactful. You want it to be short enough, but also be able to reach the target audience, and they feel like, this is a person we want to be able to see. So obviously watch your pages. If they give you specification and they say 3 pages or 2 pages or sometimes even a 1-pager, make sure you stick within that framework. If they ask you, for example, to have a list of your references, don't write there at the bottom of your page, references will be given, upon request. Put them on that CV. You don't want the recruiter thinking like this person didn't pay attention to the advert, they didn't see what the requirements were. So make sure that if they tell you to do something in your particular CV, if they ask you to highlight particular things, make sure that you have those things in your reference. And then obviously your structure is very important. You need to make sure that it has a professional appearance. So if you're applying, say, for a funky company that's kind of a sales organization that needs you to kind of show your creativity, the professional part might fall away a little bit because you're wanting to show that artsy side of yourself. But most often, if you're applying at a corporate, you want to make sure that it's professionally written. Some people use pictures in their CVs. Personally, from my experience, it kind of gives the recruiter an opportunity to be biased against you. So if, for example, you have, I don't know, red hair, and their ex-girlfriend that broke their heart, for example, has got red hair, they might not necessarily cut you a break because now you looking like someone that they don't have, positive feelings towards. So I'm not going to tell you whether you should or shouldn't put a picture, but just think about the impression that you're creating by adding that picture. If they've specifically asked you to add a picture, then definitely go for it. Although I don't think a lot of recruiters should be asking you for a picture because it's not a modeling agency. But if they did require you to add a picture, then okay, great, add a picture. But always think about the implications of adding that picture and what impact it'll have on the recruiter that you're now sending the CV to. Remember, you want to give them a good impression of yourself. You don't want to give them any reason for them to discriminate against you. Unfortunately, we do have, Employment Equity Act and Basic Conditions of Employment Act and all those things, and they do stipulate what you can and can't discriminate against. Unfortunately, we don't always control what people discriminate. So as far as possible, avoid using pictures if you can, but if they ask for it, then definitely go for it. So things that you want to avoid is, avoid using many colors. So maybe your headings are blue and then your body is black and then other things are different colors and you've got a border, and you don't make it too busy. Have it well structured, as well as making sure that if you look at it, you're actually quite pleased at looking at it, that you can spot almost the words jumping at you at that page, which are the things that you'd like to highlight for the recruiter to be able to see. Obviously, you would have looked at your job specification and then translated into your CV so that they can see all those things, by quickly looking. Like I said, they look through 30 seconds max. I think for me, if it was like a lower position, I normally gave it 15 seconds max. So in those 15 seconds, your CV must talk to me. It must tell me that I have the qualifications, I've got the skills, I've got the competencies. If I need experience, I've got the experience as well. And that also I've highlighted other important things like any associations or affiliations that I may have that are necessary for my role. So myself, as an example, I'm an industrial psychologist. I need to obviously put down that I'm affiliated with the HPCSA or SIOPSA, etc., so that they know that I am credible, that I'm not just registered and I'm not doing something about my profession. If you're an accountant, that you're registered with SECA, things like that. Okay. And then obviously making sure that your CV doesn't have too many headings, or that your headings aren't aligned, or that your headings, the one is black, the one is Arial, the one is bold, the one is underlined. You have to make sure that you're quite consistent when you're doing that. And then obviously other things that are very, very important is your grammar. We all use Microsoft Word these days. You shouldn't be making grammar errors. You shouldn't be making spelling errors because you can just use spell check. So for me as a recruiter, if I see grammar errors or spelling errors, I think to myself, this person does not pay attention to detail. They're just applying for the sake of applying. Therefore, I'm going to put your CV in the reject pile. So don't allow yourself to be discriminated against over small things that aren't necessarily things that you should be discriminated against, like your grammar, like your spelling. And then obviously everything has to be reverse chronological order. Make sure you put your most recent things first. I don't want to see your matric at the top and then, I mean, some people even put their primary school, and then their matric, and then some short course that they did, and then only then do I see the qualification that I'm actually looking for. Try and put it on the most reverse chronological, which is the most recent first, because that's the one that we want to see. Same thing with your experience, same thing with your qualifications and any accomplishments that you might want to highlight. Things to avoid: religion. I know it sounds weird, but you don't want people to be discriminating against you because of your religion. So if you're applying for an organization that is maybe Muslim, don't put there that you're Christian. You know what I mean? Because you're not telling them that actually I don't share the same values as you. I don't share the same ethos as you. So don't hire me. Even if you're not Muslim, it doesn't mean you wouldn't be able to perform the work. By telling them that, for example, you're Christian or whatever else, or Hindi or whatever other religion that you are, you actually kind of telling them, listen, I'm not the right fit for you. Avoid doing that. Avoid putting down your ID number unless they've specifically asked for it. And the reason I say this is a lot of the times we apply for positions, we are desperate because the unemployment rate is so high. And there are some people that are unscrupulous. So some people that might use, I mean, if you put down your CV, normally put down your ID, your address, your cell phone number, your email address. I mean, someone can take your details, go to Home Affairs, get an ID, and start buying with your name. You're already going to have a bad credit record unnecessarily. Take it from me. I've had my identity stolen. So do not put your ID unless they've specifically asked you to put down your ID number. And then things like your gender, unless they've specifically asked for it, there's absolutely no reason why you should put down your gender. Unless it is, for example, a male clinic where they're saying they're only wanting male. It would make sense for you to put down your gender so that they do know what your gender is. But generally speaking, you don't have to put down your gender. Don't open up yourself up for, things that are going to make you get discriminated against. And then obviously things like your health. I mean, I've seen people that say that their health is excellent, and I'm thinking, how do you know? Did you actually go to a doctor, or are you a runner? Like, don't put things there that are necessary on your CV. You want to put things that are going to make the recruiter say, listen, this is a person that I want to see. So don't put your health status unless they've absolutely asked you to put it down. And a lot of the times they wouldn't request that of you. They will actually put you through a medical test if that role requires you to be put through a medical role. Okay, and then another thing that we're going to focus on is the structure of your CV. So obviously you're going to have a header, and in your header you'll have your name and your surname. Ideally put the name and the surname that's on your ID, and then at the bottom you can maybe put, in brackets, known as, and put the name that you would like to be called if it's not the name and surname that's already, put down in your header. Then you can put down your address as well as your contact details, so your cell phone number and an email address. Please, guys, don't put your girlfriend's numbers or your boyfriend's numbers. I've had instances where I was calling a candidate and I was struggling to get a hold of them, and I got a hold of their girlfriend, and I'm just thinking to myself, why would you do that? I'm not trying to get a hold of your girlfriend or your boyfriend. Put down your contact details. If you can't get contacted and you have to use somebody else's contact details, just put down there in brackets that it's somebody else's phone. But then, like I'm saying, a recruiter is going to be thinking, if this person actually doesn't have their own telephone, how am I going to get a hold of them? How am I going to be able to give them instruction if they're doing work on site, etc.? So those are the kind of things that you want to think about. I know it's important that you get reached, but don't put down people there that aren't going to help you when the recruiter calls. I called a lady once. I had an interview with her boyfriend, and I ended up calling her because that's the number that was on the CV. And she was sleeping, and she was like talking, I think it was Xhosa or Zulu, I'm not sure. And I just thought to myself, how unprofessional is this? I'm a recruiter. I want to give this person an opportunity, and this person's now not taking it seriously by allowing his or her girlfriend to be the person that's taking the call, and that person now was sleeping and groggy and etc. So just think about those type of things when you are preparing your header. Okay, and then the next thing to consider is the structure. In particular, you need to make sure that it's a short summary of your background and your career details. We're not looking for you to show us that you're a brilliant writer. Don't make it 50 pages. You want to make sure that it's short and brief, and it gives us kind of an overview of your background as well as your career plans. So, some people have got like a little section there that talks about their aspirations, etc. You can include things like that in terms of where you want to go. What are your career plans? What kind of person are you? Are you driven? Are you motivated? Those type of things you can put there. And then, like I said, your personal details section. So add what's required. So if, for example, you're applying for a role that needs you to have a driver's license or your own car or your health status, etc., those are the kind of things that you can add under your personal details section. And then obviously your education, your tertiary and your secondary, if you've got like a matric, obviously. So don't put your matric first, for example, like I mentioned, and don't put your primary school first. Put your most recent. So if you have an honors degree, put that first, and then put your undergrad degree after that, and then you can put your matric qualification underneath that. Okay, then obviously experience. Many of us don't have experience at this point in time because we're recent graduates. So put any vacation work that you would have done and any volunteer work that you would have done. But make sure you're highlighting in those experiences what it is you did, what you learned, what skills you acquired. Because a lot of the times, especially if it's a graduate program or an internship, they aren't necessarily looking to see that you've worked before, but they do want to know what kind of skills do you have. And by writing that experience of your vacation work and volunteer work, they can kind of sum up what are the different qualities that you come up with. And then obviously, if you are, for example, a chairperson of a society, etc., those are the type of things that you might want to put up there. If you have any other achievements, like maybe you passed cum laude or those type of things, you might want to add that as well inside of your leadership and achievement section. Okay, I don't see any questions, so I'll continue. And then obviously things like any training that you would have done, so any short courses. So if you are, let me think of a little bit of a crazy one. If you studied to be a teacher, as an example, and you did a short course in child development or a short course in how to bring out the best in learners, as an example, those are the type of training courses that you might want to put on in your CV as well. And as I mentioned, you want to also put in your skills. So add any skills that are relevant to the job in the post. And then add soft skills that you have, like interpersonal skills, communication skills, time management. These I wouldn't always add particularly in your CV, but rather in your cover letter. But if you don't have an opportunity to write a cover letter because the recruiter didn't ask for one, this is the type of thing that you can add on there as well. And then, as I mentioned, you're going to add your memberships and any associations that you may have, and then any interests or hobbies if they are relevant. So say you're applying to be a journalist, as an example, and you love reading, you love writing, you might want to add that as an interest or a hobby in that section so that you can show the recruiter that you have that as a passion or that as something that you're interested in. And then obviously, last but not least, you're going to add your references. Obviously, always ask for permission from the reference. Don't put someone now because they were your lecturer in first year and say, no, that person knows me, I used to get distinctions in their class, and just add them on your CV. Make sure you've gotten permission from them, because the last thing you want is for a recruiter to call them and they don't even remember you because it was such a long time ago. So ask for permission for that particular person to add them on your CV as a reference. And then once they've said yes, you'll obviously make sure that you add their name, their designation in that particular organization, and then maybe the relationship that they had with you. So were they your lecturer, were they your mentor, and then some contact details, a cell phone or an email address, or both of them if you've got those. Avoid putting your pastor, avoid putting your uncle, avoid putting a family member, unless that pastor was someone that could have seen your work ethic because you were maybe the chairperson of the youth league, as an example. Or if it's a family member, maybe they own a store and you used to work at the store when it was vacation. Those are the type of people you can add. But generally speaking, don't add a pastor, don't add family members or relatives. It's not a good idea. Okay, so I've got a little bit of an activity for you guys. Say you guys are applying for a graduate program, and this graduate program in particular is looking for people that have got entrepreneurship qualification, human resources, project management, or sales related kind of qualification. You need to be able to speak another South African language. So Xhosa and Zulu are obviously advantageous. You need to have good spoken and written English command, good communication and interpersonal skills. You need to be computer literate with advanced Microsoft skills preferred. You need to be an innovative thinker. Strong leadership is also advantageous. So I'm going to give you guys about 5 minutes to kind of jot down your own CVs on a piece of paper, and then those that are brave will then, show us on the screen, just so that we can critique those and see what are the different things that you've done. Is that fine with the chair people?